Guys, I'm Lindsay. Today we're going to be talking about instrument approaches. So for an overview for our slides, we're going to go through the ILS localizer back course, RNAV GPS, and VOR approaches. Each types are ways you can get into the airport in case you have full clouds coverage. Each of them have their own minimums and visibility, but we're going to go through some specifics and what you need to do in order to fly those approaches. So our first one is the ILS approach. It's a precision approach with vertical guidance. So first we have our wired checklist. This is required for each of our approaches. So you'll see that as number one. You have to do your weather, instruments, radios, equipment, and descent checklists, and then your en route briefings. So here for ILS specifically, you have to identify the initial approach fix, and then once you're there, you can descend if you have been cleared for the approach by ATC. Your final approach fix, you'll see on the approach, we have an example on the next slide, is identified by a lightning bolt, the bird's eye view, and the glide slope intercept. It's a lot easier if you start the final descent if the diamond is above the line, not directly centered on the line yet. So immediately as you do that, you can start the timer and do your 100 knot, 500 feet per minute descent with your flaps at 10. And then your callouts needed are 500 feet above minimums for your final items. So you can do mixture, ridge, fuel selector on both, lights on, and 100 feet above minimums. And then once you get to your minimum altitude, the ILS has a DA, so your decision altitude is when you must go miss if you're at the minimum altitude and can't make normal descent to landing within the minimum visibility, or when you do not have one of the appropriate environment requirements in sight. So here's an example. This is ILS localizer runway 7 left at Daytona. So first of all, you have to be tuned in to 109.7 up here. You'll call all these important details out, like the landing distance, touchdown zone, missed approach, things like that, for each approach when you brief them through your wired checklist. And then if you look down here, kind of bottom left area, you'll see the view that helps you look to know when you get on a descent. So if you are doing ILS 7 left for category B, like most people do in the Cessna 172, you'll go down to a minimum of 230 feet. So again, once you're at that decision altitude, you have to go miss if you do not have a runway in sight, or final approach to landing, or runway environment in sight. Next one we're going to talk about is the localizer approach. It is very similar to the ILS, except it does not give you the vertical guidance. So you have to complete the wired checklist and identify the initial approach fix. The difference here is your final approach fix is identified by the Maltese cross on the bird's eye view instead of the lightning bolt. And you'll do the same descent, everything like that, 500 feet above minimums, final items, 100 feet above minimums. Except here, once you have reached your minimums, the localizer has an MDA, so that's a missed minimum descent altitude, and then that means that if you are not able to see the runway, you can't make normal descent to landing, you have to go stay at that altitude until you reach the missed approach point, and then you can go miss. One detail about this is that it is measured in time. So for our Cessna 172, we cannot do DME on a localizer approach. Simultaneously, you can have GPS approach in there as well, but just doing localizer, you cannot measure by distance, so you'll have to do the time shown on the bottom. So if we go over here to the next slide, you'll see right here on the right, depending on your speed, so if we're around 100 or 90 knots at 3 minutes and 12 seconds from the final approach fix, you'll have to go miss because then you're at the missed approach point. So this, you'll see, is the same exact one, so you can do either ILS or localizer. So if at any point you're doing the ILS and you do lose that vertical guidance, you are going to follow the approach minimums for the localizer, and then the following details for times and things like that on the runway, and noticing that you have different minimums even though you're on the same approach. And another one we have is localizer back course. So this one, very similar, and you are still doing localizer, so nothing significant changes there, but it is very tricky depending on which way you have your CDI facing, and there's a few things that change there. So again, this localizer back course has an MDA, so you must go miss once you're at the missed approach point, and you have to do all the call outs and everything like that. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see the top one right here of a heading of 169 is having the CDI flipped. And you notice here that if you have deflection to the right, then you will also have to correct to the right. So if it is reversed, you'll have reverse sensing, and you'll get different direction deflection and things like that for when you're flying this approach, and you'll have to keep an eye on that because you may be likely to head towards the wrong runway or the back course instead of the actual approach you're trying to shoot. So here's a localizer back course, and again, it's significant on the top right of the approach for it to say BC. If it does not say localizer BC, runway 27 left, you cannot do the back course approach. And make sure you are tuned in to 106.3 on there, and then make sure you check your minimums and everything on the approach plate there. You'll follow in on the course, and this one does have a hold in the pattern, and you'll continue going. Another approach we have is RNAV GPS approach. I would say this is by far the easiest approach we have. And if you look on the PFD up here on the top right, you see the CDI is magenta colored. So you know that you are doing GPS RNAV approach because it is magenta. Just make sure you have whatever runway you want selected in direct infer-enter, and you have that going procedure 2 or put in the full approach. So you'll do the wired checklist, and you'll have to signify the initial approach fix and the final approach fix, so that will be marked by the Maltese cross. And same things there, you'll do your 100 feet per minute, or 100 knot, 500 feet per minute, flaps 10 descent. The thing about RNAV is that it has 3 different types of approaches that come with it. You can get LPV, LNAV, VNAV, or LNAV. So these all talk about your vertical and lateral guidance, and then it is another call out to say approach mode when one of these pops up on the compass for the G1000. And you'll have the 500 feet above minimums and 100 feet above minimums call outs as well. So when you are at reaching minimums, you'll notice that LPV and LNAV VNAV have a decision altitude, but LNAV has minimum descent altitude, so you'll have to go to the missed approach point for the LNAV approach there. So it's critical to see on the right side of the inner compass on the PFD which type you have signified for the approach mode on there. So an example here, we have RNAV GPS runway 7 left here at Daytona, and you'll come in and you can load the whole entire approach in. So you see you have COCAD, Zopri, FOLIG, they're all the GPS waypoints that you'll have to track on your way into the station. So you do need WAS to do this. So you see in the top left, it's no longer a, what's it called? It's no longer a frequency you have to put in, you just need WAS. So you'll do that, and then once you are cleared, you can go down to the decision altitude. And as long as you get LPV, you can descend down regularly to 230. But if there are any frequency issues or anything such as that, and you get LNAV, VNAV, you do have that changed altitude, minimum altitude, and missed procedure. So make sure you keep an eye on that as well. Following that, we have a VOR approach. So VOR approach can be signified with a VOR, VOR DME, or BORTAC. So if you see on the top right, that's the little house building that it looks like. Call it a sombrero. You will have to do the wired checklist. Many VOR approaches have a procedure turn, so you might get in doing a procedure turn or a hold to help you complete that wired checklist. VOR approaches are a little bit more tedious because you have a lot of different radials along your route that you'll have to track with different frequencies. So you have to keep an eye on that and how far apart they are to make sure you're on top of the game for that. But then again, you'll initiate your descent at initial approach fix, final approach fix with your flaps 10. The tricky thing about VOR is there's no significant point that marks when you're on the final approach fix. So you know that you're on the final approach fix when you're within 10 nautical miles of the airport, within 10 degrees of the final approach course, and you are cleared for the approach, and you're going to be descending down to the charted altitudes. So once you are there, you can do your final items when you get to 500 feet above your minimums. And this VOR has an MDA, your minimum decision altitude, so you can descend down to minimums but not go miss until reaching the missed approach point. Other than that, everything is very similar. So here we have VOR runway 16 at Daytona, and it's signified by the Ormond Beach VOR. So a lot of times you'll come in towards Ormond Beach, go out on the 336 radial, turn left heading 210, turn right heading 110, and track it inbound until the CDI centers, getting you for the 156 course to the station of Ormond. You can follow straight into VOR runway 16. Looking down at the bottom on the left, you do have times here on the right, just in case you don't have DME. And you can check here as long as you are going straight in runway 16 or circling, you have to remain at 760 feet for your minimums. And that is all I have for you guys today. So if you have any questions on how to do instrument approaches, ILS, localizer, back course, VOR, RNAV, GPS, anything like that, be sure to email me. It will be attached in this email on this PowerPoint. And just remember to always read over the initial approach point and the missed approach procedures, because those are the two key things that you never want to miss. Make sure you are keeping up with your ATC communications, and you always get that wire checklist done before you tell ATC that you are ready to complete the approach. So I hope you guys enjoyed this and have a great day.